When I heard the pastor was going to be gone this week, oh good, maybe a lot of other people will be too. I don't mean that as a negative comment, I understand what Alan has told us many times. This is a scary place to be. If I was talking with Rob Aaron this week, and he was reminding me of a class that I took, and he took the same class, and probably many of you have too, and that is speech class at Walla Walla College University with Lauren Dickinson. Lauren is still going strong. We have stayed in touch through the years while Artis and I were living there in College Place. And just a really neat individual. Can't believe he's still with us, because man, I thought he was old when I was a student. But I'm probably going to break every rule that I learned from Lauren as a professor. I'm going to break every rule that technical difficulties here.
Get that up a little closer to you.
Okay. Better?
Yeah, I think so.
And I'm going to tell you the ending while I'm giving you the beginning. I'm going to tell you the story of how Artis and I went to Belize. And this story is not about us. This story is about you. And so, as the first slide comes up, it says, our story. And I'm going to tell you what the last slide says. You may have already guessed it, your story. So you know when you see that your story come up, that we're about done. And I was hoping there was another verse to Roy's song, that there were going to be lots more children, that Dean would take more time for the story, but everything stayed right on the clock. June 20, 2004, is a day that if you were to ask Artis, I don't know if she remembers, because we have not talked about what I'm going to do today at all, and that was by intent. And I don't know if she remembers what June 20 is or not, but it is burned into my memory. It's one of those dates that doesn't mean a thing to anybody else, probably unless you were married on that day. And I didn't check the church directory, or I have birthdays on that day. I didn't check. But June 20 for me has a very special meaning. It was a very common day. It was a very ordinary day. We had started our day as we had many, many, many other days. And I'd gotten up. At that point in my life, I thought I had semi-retired. And I had been asked by the State Line Church there in the Walla Walla Valley to manage KLRF, a radio station, which is a Life Talk radio affiliate. And I'd gotten up, gone to the station, did what I normally do while I'm there. And on this particular day, it was a busy day because I was getting ready for board meeting that night. Dean, you know what those days are like. 6 o'clock came, the board members started to arrive, the board chairman arrived, we went over the agenda, and as we were getting up out of my office to go out into the big common area where the board met, I had chairs set up for them out there. The board chairman said, by the way, I need to see you after the board meeting. And you don't do that to Grant McPherson, because that becomes an obsession in my mind we were just together for 15 minutes. Why didn't he say, I need to talk to you after the board meeting? And so we got through the board meeting. They were pretty basic, pretty routine. Everybody left except the board chairman. And he said, Grant, he says, I'm going to share something with you that I think is going to change your life. I had no idea what he was talking about even yet. He said, tomorrow evening you're going to get a telephone call from Belize. Where? I had no idea where Belize was at. He says, you didn't know it, but my wife and I at the Auburn camp meeting just 2 weeks before had accepted a job in Belize to be the administrator of the hospital in Belize. He came home from the Auburn camp meeting and had a heart attack. Doctor said, sure, you can go, but don't plan on coming home. You won't make it. You need to stay here. You need to be taken care of. And so he contacted the board there in Belize, and they said, well, the usual thing, well, do you know somebody else? And he said, yes. He says, my wife and I have been talking about that, and he says, we do have a name we would like to suggest. And they said, great, who is it? Well, it's Grant and Artist McPherson. They live here in College Place. I have a board meeting with them this week, and I will tell them, if you want me to, that you're going to call. And they said, please do. So board meeting happens, and we get the notification that and even yet today, these people are very, very close friends. He was on staff for many years there at Walla Walla College. By the way, in case you might know them, is Dave and Carol Lee Gill in the College Place area. They go to the State Line Church. And so 24 hours goes by. Sure enough, the telephone rings. It wasn't a call from Belize, it was a call from Yakima. And Ed and Ruth McKenzie were on the telephone, and we spoke over the phone for an hour and 20 minutes. At the end of the conversation, I told them that Artist and I would talk about this and that we would get back with them. Within 24 hours, we called and we said no, that we feel like we need to stay here because my parents, Artist had already lost her mother. My parents, we had just moved from Portland they had bought a place 2 doors from us. And many years prior to this, my sister had been killed in an airplane accident. And I knew the moment that accident happened that the role that our family all knew my sister was going to play was caregiver for my parents. All of a sudden, the baby of the family is going to be that individual. And I took it very seriously. And like I said, my parents had just joined us there in College Place. I thought it was the end of the story, and I wouldn't even be telling it to you here today, except in August, we got a second call. Won't you please come? Won't you please consider? No, we have made our minds. We don't feel like we're being called to do this. And no, our answer has to stay no. Time progressed. I was at the radio station on this one particular day. The phone rang and my father was on the phone. And he said, hey, why don't you guys come over for supper tonight? Okay. Didn't think anything of it. We got there at the planned time. Remember, they're just 2 doors from us, so I had parked in the garage when we got home, walked down two houses, knocked on their door and went in and had a nice meal. Nothing unusual happened, except Dad stood up, cleared the table off, and I knew immediately when he sat down something was changing, and it was going to change fast. Remember, by this time I'm 55 years of age and been around my dad for a while. And he says, "What's this I'm hearing about you guys turning down a mission call?" And I said, "Yeah, it's true. Why?" And so if you're too bored, I'm putting a couple slides up on the screen so you can please enjoy some of the beauty of Belize. And he said, "I don't understand." He says, "Your entire life, all I've heard about is the possibility of mission service." And I said, "Yes, Dad, but not now. I promised you that we would be here for you in your golden years." And he said, "Well," he says, "Dorothy, my stepmom, my mom had passed away about 30 years prior to this. And Dorothy and I have talked about this, and we figured that was the reason, and we're releasing you of that obligation," which was quite a surprise to me. And I said, he says, "Would you still consider it?" I said, "Dad, they've already called twice. They're not going to call back again." But I said, "I'll tell you what, if they call again, we will go." I was pretty confident that we would never hear from them again. This time, actually within 48 hours, you guessed it, the third call came. Between that evening supper with my parents and that third call, for some reason, and I do believe it's the Lord impressing upon my mind, I had a clear thought that went through my mind. Be careful, Grant. You're getting very close to the Jonah story here. Remember, we have turned him down twice. Was I going to turn him down a third time? But I had told Dad and Dorothy that we would go if we were called a third time. We got the call within 48 hours, and surprise of surprises, when we answered the phone and they identified myself, I said, "Yes, we will come and we will take a look at the job." They wanted to fly us down. Artist and I were typical Americans. I think most of you know that I'm Canadian and she's American. We didn't have we didn't have passports. The very next morning, I jumped in the car and drove to Surrey, British Columbia. Artist went to the post office, and within 6 days we had passports. Within 8 or 9 days we were on an airplane for our first trip outside of the United States. We spent a week there in Belize. I think, look at that picture carefully. You should recognize the spot. This was our mode of transport. I'm going to tell you where the spot is, but if you look at it carefully, I think you'll figure it out. This was our mode of transportation. Every single one of the three pieces there were a gift from God. The truck came from Pendleton, from a lady who had absolutely no intention of trading. Her son owned the dealership. The day before I went to the dealership, she called up her son and said, "Okay, I'll trade my truck in and you can get me a new one." That truck was in absolute mint condition, and is still in Belize today. We left it down there. A contractor wanted it so badly. The camper was actually a repo, and the trailer was sponsored by the community center in Milton Freewater, Oregon. Inside that trailer is all of our personal items, but also 24 ADRA boxes with clothing that never made it to Belize. We don't understand why, but it never made it. The Mexican authorities wouldn't let us take them across the border. Here we are at the border in a place called Pharr, Texas. Unless you were doing what we were getting ready to do, you wouldn't even know that Pharr, Texas, Pharr, existed. It is a border crossing that is designed only for individuals who are transmigrante. In other words, I'm traveling through your country and I'm not coming back. And all of those vehicles were on their way into Central and South America and other countries south of Mexico. We averaged about 200 to 300 miles a day through, and this was our typical parking lot at night. And these are gas stations for trucks. And they allowed us to park there. You see the trucks all around us. There are several stories around this, but I'm going to keep moving. If you don't know where Belize is, I hope that map helps you understand exactly where we were at. From College Place, when we left the house in College Place, I reached up and pushed the odometer. And when we pulled into La Loma Luz Adventist Hospital, 3 weeks later, we had traveled 5,018 miles. Including, folks, that truck and trailer driving through Shelton. Remember, Dell and Earl lived here. I had to bring the truck and trailer to Olympia because, remember, every one of those items were new to us. And I had to leave the United States with title in hand, not a bill of sale. I had to have clear documentation that I could take every one of those vehicles across the border. And that was done right down here in Olympia. I had to come here to do it. I couldn't do it anywhere else. So this was our home for the next 8.5 years. And as you can tell, a very high point in our life. I'm going to change gears because I've just told you a story of a no, no, yes. One of the things and now I'm going to tell you a story of yes, immediately. One of the ways that I felt like the word about this institution could be spread over the country, in our interview for the job, I shared with their board, my future board, that I felt like La Loma Luz was an example of the children's story, or the children's song, Hiding Your Light Under a Bushel Basket. I felt like this hospital was very much a story about hiding your light under a bushel basket. I spent through those 8.5 years very consistently. I was only at the hospital about half time. Every morning I was there, but most afternoons I was away from the institution, involved in some kind of outreach out into the country. One of those methods that I decided to use was Rotary. And there are a number of stories that came out of that, but this one particular day, I had gone to Rotary as usual, And when I came out of the meeting place, we'd had lunch in our meeting, and I had gotten in my pickup, and all of a sudden there were two cars that just come flying into the parking lot, and what in the world is going on? One of the individuals got out, and I immediately recognized that it was one of the pastors in that area. And I got out of the pickup and walked over, and we greeted each other. And he said, "Grant," he says, "are you headed to Belize City?" I was in Belmopan, the nation's capital, and it was about an hour and 20-minute drive yet on into Belize City. And I said, "Yes, I'm on my way to Belize City." He said, "Great." He said, "Would you be willing to take my passenger to the airport?" Sure. You have to remember, gasoline was $6 a gallon. And a nurse's salary in Belize, and a graduate from university, degreed nurse, started at 16,000 Belize dollars a year. That's 8,000 US. Okay? And I said, yeah, and so we were always doing this kind of thing. And I said, yeah, I'll be glad to. Just a couple miles out of my way to go to the airport. So they grabbed his suitcase and he jumped in, and I said, "I'm Grant McPherson, and who are you?" For some reason, I have looked and looked and looked. I cannot find, I apologize, I cannot find his name. But he was a representative from Share Him. That's the important part. Don Falkenberg's organization that goes out and does evangelistic crusades around the world. I looked up on the internet this week, and at this point, Share Him has done 8,000 evangelistic crusades around the world.
Amen.
The story I'm telling you is about 16 of those. We're on our way to the airport, and I said, "Well, this is exciting. Is Share Him coming to Belize?" And he said, "No, we're not." He says, "The church doesn't want us." You're going to have to explain that. And immediately, when he said no, he wasn't going to unwrap that for me. I found out later what had happened. I said, "If the hospital sponsored that event for you, would you come?" And he says, "We can't do it without church support." And I clearly remember I was driving along, and I said, if I could find, and if this story sounds familiar, I think it's the story the Lord placed in my mind. I said, if I could find I didn't have much confidence either. If I could find 4 churches that would help me put this event on, would you come? He said, "Well, that's really up to Elder Falkenberg, but I can tell you that the welcome mat has not been rolled out to us." But he said, "Yes, I will be landing in North Carolina here in a few hours." And he says, "I will call Elder Falkenberg immediately and tell them that you are trying to put this thing back together." I thanked him for that commitment, left him at the airport, and my plan was to go on into Belize City and continue to do the business and the reason I had gone to Belize City that day. And so when I got back out to the highway from the airport, and the highway is a very loose term. Remember, we are in Central America, and for 8.5 years, except when I flew back to Houston and Seattle and what have you, we never saw freeways or anything like that. Roads were pretty good though. And I had a decision to make. Do I turn left and go back to the hospital, or do I turn right and go in and do my business? Well, you know the answer to that. I turned left. Immediately got on the phone, called Adon, who is a chaplain of the hospital, and I said, "Adon, I've just dropped off an individual at the airport. He is with Share Him. They are willing to come if we can find crusades. I said, Don, how would you like to be the coordinator for 16 simultaneous crusades? He said, I love it. He said, what's stopping this? I said, we have to find at least 4 churches that will sign on today to do this. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm on my way back to the hospital. I want you to be on the front steps when I get there, and I want you to have your list of churches and elders, and we're going to go visiting churches for this evening. He said, exactly. I arrived back about 2 hours later. Don jumped into the vehicle. Folks, by 9 o'clock that night, we had 8 sites. We called, and went back to the hospital, and at 10 o'clock I sent an email, listed the names of the elders in the churches, and that we were going to, the hospital was in fact going to sponsor this event. Folks, the team that came, and I actually was thinking about you 2 young ladies as I was preparing this. I was hoping you might be here. The team that came from Amazing Facts, and they were all young people who had just gone through the Amazing Facts evangelistic school and had partnered with Share Him to go somewhere in the world. One of the advantages of Belize, and I again checked this week, you can go on Travelocity and most sites. You can fly from Portland or Seattle most times for about $500 round trip into Belize and back. So it's a very inexpensive place for mission trips and that type of thing to go. And I'm sure that's the reason why Amazing Facts had chosen Belize, because these were young people that didn't have a lot of money. But when I was there at the airport picking them up along with the rest of the hospital team, these guys are our speakers? You gotta be kidding me. And I said, hey, this thing has been of the Lord so far, no reason to question it. At the end of the 2 weeks, 5 nights a week, each one of those kids, young people spoke. They brought in the pastoral team and they baptized 200 souls. Amen. This was after our, and I don't like to speak negatively, but this is after our local leadership had said, oh, don't waste your time there. It won't work good for you here. You need to go somewhere else. 2 years later, that event through Amazing Facts was recognized in the Inter-American Division as a, I think they called it a gold something or other, evangelistic outreach. 200 souls were baptized. I attended 5 of those baptisms that day. And something happened in the weeks that followed that I would like to share with especially our leadership team here. 50% of the people who came in that outreach, 50% of the people that came in were adopted, for lack of a better term, were adopted by church family members. So you have a brand new infant member, and that individual would be matched with a mature individual in the church. The other 50% we were not able to get adopted. The last information that I got about those 200 is that 90% of the first 100 that were adopted are still in the church today. Of the 100 who were not adopted, 90 of them we do not know where they're at today. As we baptize new members in the church, I strongly recommend that, and Virginia, you're a good example of this, that these new babies need to be cared for. And they need to be matured, and they need to be assisted in their new walk in life. I now want to take you to just 2 weeks ago. And I hope your life for the last 2 weeks, and Dean, this is the reason I'm doing this today. He's been on my case for several weeks now to do this. He didn't know what it was going to be. But in his role as head elder, I have just been obsessed for the last 2 weeks watching TV, the news channels. My heart is broken. But I have hope. I have hope because I have seen what this church has become. Betty, I appreciate your comment. I am probably in the 5th version of this talk because Sabbath school changed it some. Special music changed it some. And Betty changed it some today. I don't know what the role of this church is going to be in the weeks and months to come. I am convinced that there's a role we can play.
Praise God.
Why did this touch my heart so? Within the first couple of days after the airlift started, and I have never seen this young lady again. Maybe she was just there for me. They had a young lady, she couldn't have been more than 25, maybe a little bit more. And as I get older, the young people keep looking younger. And she had just 3 months prior returned to her homeland, Afghanistan. She had left the country, gotten her training as a doctor, and had returned to her country to help in a critically important area for that country. Unbeknownst to me, in 2004, Adventist Health International, based out of Loma Linda, had been contacted by the Afghan government and had gone, a team of 4 had gone to Afghanistan to see how Adventist Health International could help. La Loma Luz became an Adventist health institution while we were there. Half the time that we were there was, it was an independent hospital. The other half the time we were there, it was an Adventist health institution. Shortly after we became a member of Adventist Health International, Dr. Hart, the CEO of Loma Linda, maybe some of you recognize the name, came to Artis and I and wanted to know if we would go to Afghanistan. We said no. Couldn't imagine going. But for the rest of my life, I wonder if I did the right thing, if we did the right thing. Artist made the comment to me this week, and she said, yeah, we probably would be dead right now. But when the next time we woke up, we hopefully know where we're at and why we're there. And when I saw this young lady who has seen the rest of the world, I don't know where she got her training. She was very articulate, very well dressed, very dignified. But halfway through her interview, she realized, that it was all falling apart, and she doesn't know what her future holds for her either. Like I said, I have not seen her on the news again. I have no idea. Maybe she got out, maybe she didn't. But if we're, as an individual or as a church, are asked to step forward, are we ready to step out? I had intended to have that picture up there when I asked that question, playing catch up here. To me, it's a very contemplative picture. Are we ready? Sure, we can answer this question corporately, but I think the most important answer we can give is individually.
Amen.
We had one of these that lived on the hospital grounds for a short time. They're real characters. I'm hoping your minds are still thinking. We are getting close to wrapping up here. I couldn't share our story without you at least answering the question, did you live in a Mayan area? Yes, we did. We had artifacts that the hospital was keeping, of course, that were found right on the hospital grounds. Mayan artifacts. This particular temple was about 9 miles from the hospital. What am I doing here? So, like I said, I told you the ending at the beginning. What's your story? That can be taken one of two ways. There's not, if I can get up here and do this, there's not an individual here who can't do this. You didn't see me paging through the Bible and reading texts and all of that. And as I look at Jesus' ministry, to me, about 99% of his ministry was telling stories. So I don't feel like I've shortchanged us today. If you were coming expecting that, and I am so thankful that we have individuals. Larry, you have a talent that I won't have this side of heaven. And taking Bible texts and bringing them to life. I'm so proud of Rob and his getting up here and good spiritual presentations. But I'm hoping and praying that this presentation today also touches each one of us. Because we have to answer the question someday, what was your story? Thanks for listening.
Amen.
Yes, I should have. Let's stand.